So thank you very much for coming along to this Techie Tuesday updates, part of the virtual staff room series. As always, these are the updates from May 2022, from last month, just collated into a single place. Chris, good man that he is, will of course share the video and the slide deck out afterwards. So you've got all the information in there and all the links. Each of the titles is a link to the Google Help page, so you can go direct to the source. Being a Techie Tuesday, the usual rider that I might well understand each of the words, but I don't necessarily understand them in that order. I'm hoping that James will be able to join us in case there are any techie questions, but I'll probably just lean on Dave, who who will probably know as much anyway. So here we go. So first one, creating spaces using Google Chat's API is now available in developer preview. So you've got different ways to create those if you need to create those within your organization, rather than every single person, Uncle Tom Cobley and all, creating all their own individual spaces. You can actually go and create those and add the members in, which is kind of quite handy. So it gives you a little bit more control about all of those chat spaces, because if you do get the habit of using them, it can quickly get to a stage where there's lots and lots and it feels a little bit unmanageable. So to be able to do that is actually very useful. So that's the first of the updates from May. This is one of a series of updates, I think, which as far as I understand it, do please correct me if anyone knows anything better, where if you've got external tools working to protect your systems, and this one is a kind of virus protection piece of software, then you can actually offer delegated access to them. So you should then start to get reports inside the admin panel from that tool. So it kind of just puts everything in one place. Seems to me a really sensible thing. I'm thinking, Dave, in particular, you've got lots and lots of admin panels you've got to log into. If you've got a tool, like Securely, or in this example, VirusTotal, that's layered on top, to actually have to go to yet another admin panel to log in to get that information, actually is just another additional task. But it'd be nice if it was all in one place. So if this is a start of lots and lots of kind of third-party tools that schools and colleges do use, integrating into the admin panel to give you a single place for those reports, I think that's actually a very good thing. And I'm assuming it's not, VirusTotal isn't the one that I know. It is a kind of virus checking piece of software, but it's, from the bit of reading I did, it looks like it's more typically US, which is the common pattern. Google tend to start with the US use tools that are used and spread out to wider ones later. So we'll have to see how that one develops, but it's the first of many to give you access through the admin panel for their reports, which is good. Okay, so this one, again, this is what classic example of one that I can read out, but I don't fully understand what it asks it to tell. I know SSO is single sign-on, but quite how this works and what it does, I don't know. Is single sign-on something that you use, Dave? And can you shed light on this? Can you tell us what it actually means in plain English?
Yeah, so it basically allows you to use your Google credentials to sign into other services.
Okay. And was that not always the case before anyway?
Yeah, I'm just trying to read this slide actually, because I was looking at what VirusTotal was on another tab. So,
all right.
Profiles for multiple third-party identity providers. So it's just another way of linking up with other partners, I think, because you can have SSO through technologies such as LDAP, and I think this is just another way of getting in there. And it looks like you can set this up to only work on certain OUs, which may be good. Because we've got group and OU on the graphic that you've got on screen there.
Yeah.
So it may be that we would want to be able to link different OUs within Google admin panel to different groups within other platforms. Perhaps.
Right.
I have to say, I've not seen this announcement, so I've not had a chance to read about it yet.
Okay. All right. Okay. So it looks like it's a way to control which third parties people can and can't log into, which actually could be a good idea, couldn't it? Say people using their official work email for things that will offer SSO, but you don't necessarily want to use it for that.
I think the other thing is as well, one of the exercises I'm looking at doing later this year is looking at restricting which services we use our Google accounts to sign into. And if we can use this to place group-based restrictions and then that would be good. I'm thinking, for an example, it's not really good practice for us to allow learners to use their Google credentials that we provide them with to sign into Roblox, or platforms such as that, which then therefore they may come into contact with unsavory individuals, shall we say.
Yeah.
And questions may be asked as to why we're providing them with an account that allows them to get into there. So there is functionality within the admin panel. Tony Shepherd has provided some advice and guidance on this in the past. So I'm looking at that with him as a way of restricting which services we allow SSO to work with through Google, just as a way of restricting where our data goes as well. You know, it all pulls back to GDPR as well, because
Absolutely.
when you're providing single sign-on, you're also potentially providing more information other than username to the third party. So we have to be careful of that. So yeah, that's probably what it's referring to.
Excellent, great. That's really helpful. Thanks for that. There was guidance one that came out a long time ago. I'm trying to think when. I think it was around about 2008, 2009 from the government, and there was a phrase in there that I remember schools getting vexed by about their right to keep the users safe when they're on their systems. And originally, when I first started using computers, systems was relatively easy to do because it meant it was while they were in school and logging on, because there was no access to the systems anywhere else. But now, Google Workspace, your systems is wherever they can log on, and they're on your system, aren't they? So that responsibility to keep them safe by restricting the use of that account is really important for schools and colleges, I think. So that would be great if that's what this does. So thanks for that, Dave. That's really useful. Okie dokie. And this is kind of a end user one, really, but I thought I'd put it back in here in case you weren't here yesterday. I know you were, Dave, but we'll leave it in for the recording. It was originally going to be set that all classic sites were going to be going to start to disappear this June, and then July they'd no longer be able to view the old versions of the sites. They've extended it for 6 months, but it's a really simple process for your users that have got classic sites to get them set up as new sites. And it's just worth them doing it, just in case there's a risk they might lose something that they don't realize that they need until it's too late. And December will be on us before we actually know it. You know what it's like with time. So it's really important to be warning your users that if they've got any classic sites still, the classic sites manager is literally, you can literally tick a single box and it will select all the sites that you've got, and you can just convert them all at once, and then you get emails to tell you that it's done. So it's one of those things that it's like the YouTube debacle, isn't it? When everyone was fine, those that had read all the endless prompts and reminders, but one or two people didn't read them or weren't subscribed to the newsletters. So suddenly, when it all got turned off, as Google said they would, there was a right to do for some organizations. So making sure everyone knows this one is really important, so they don't get stung when the date does come, because I suspect they won't extend it again, because new sites has been going for a long while now, hasn't it? 2 or 3 years probably. So I don't think it'll last much longer with classic sites access. So that's that one. The end user, really.
Just Dave's got his hand up there, Paul, I think.
Oh yeah, I missed the bleep. Yeah, sorry, go for it.
Sorry, Paul. Yeah, just to point out, I know you mentioned yesterday, and I've brought this up many times in the past, that if you are using classic sites with page level permissions, that's still not a function of new sites. So I would be wary of converting to new sites. And I suspect this is possibly why it's been delayed by a further 6 months, because it's already been delayed, this, hasn't it? And I suspect that it's probably because they recognise they haven't got full functionality on new sites yet, despite new sites being about 3 years old.
Yeah, it could well be that. Yeah, and page level permissions is brilliant, isn't it? It's such a shame that it's not there, and it needs to be sorted. But yeah, so maybe I'll ask if there's any hints. It might be that they make mention in the Anywhere School this evening. That might be. You never know. But I'll see what I can find out about page level permissions, because we've had this conversation, haven't we, a few times, and it needs to be on the roadmap, doesn't it? I'll check through that. I mean, the roadmaps I've been to recently, there's been no mention of it, but I'll check and then I'll ask, see if I can find the site's kind of development lead on that, so that we know, because that's really important, isn't it? Yep, you're quite right. Okay, that's lovely. Thanks for that prompt, Dave. Good. So apps, sheets, enterprise and standard. This is in here because, of course, whilst you've got some access, it's also a paid tool. There was no pretty picture to go with this one. And there are people out there using app sheets to build their own internal apps for a whole series of different things. It's extending its availability into the Enterprise Plus and Enterprise Standard versions. No mention of the Education Plus bit, but I'm aware that some people out there are making use of it. So just to know that its usage is extending even further. I'm surprised it isn't free, really, but there we go. It's not. I think they must have bought it from a third-party company to get access to it. So if you are using BigQuery, exporting your log data now can happen in, they're saying, near real time. I don't know whether that's a specific technical phrase that gives you some sense of what the time is, but it will be more or less instant, I suppose, is the thing. So that any data sets that people are using, if you store, assessment data in BigQuery and give people sheets access to it so they can analyze without affecting the data, for example, then the updates process will be much quicker, and they'll get more current and up-to-date data because the export is happening in more or less real time. So that's just that. So that's a change. Again, BigQuery, I should just say, yes, of course, it can be a paid-for service. So even if you're not on a paid SKU, you can pay to access BigQuery as a separate thing. But it does, access to BigQuery does come with Education Plus. I forgot to put the label on that slide. So if you're on Education Plus, you do have access to BigQuery through Sheets out to BigQuery, but you've got to build the BigQuery instance before you can link it to the BigQuery instance to make use of it. Okay, these we talked about these DevOps yesterday. I mentioned at Meet, Steve mentioned Polly about things that can happen. It's just to be aware that as the admin person, you would need to allow the apps to be installed in order for them to be installed before the people can actually make use of them. But it's just one of those tools that increases the efficiency of your workflows, because you don't have to leave a particular place to be able to get access to information from another app, because you can build it into the chat app. And I use Meet a lot, and I'm going to start using Polly because that sounds fantastic that Steve mentioned yesterday, where you can add polls in. That's a really neat little idea. So I'm going to have a go at that next chance I get. So that's just further developments in that DevOps thing to allow people to include more. And if you go to the link, it will take you to a page that gives you the full, so Giphy's in there, Asana, Salesforce. I know schools generally don't use Salesforce. Zendesk, there might be some schools are using Zendesk for their support tickets and things. So they all integrate into a chat, so you can track it. And I was thinking that in terms of a use case, if this is the chat of all the team within an organization that has support tickets, if you do use Zendesk, for example, you'll see within the chat then who's actually responded to the support tickets, so you'll know whether they're complete and whether they're resolved and things. So it might actually be a neat little way to keep track of those if you're using something like Zendesk. I think there's about 15 or 20 apps now that are in there that you can integrate with your chat, so it's worth having a look in case you do use any of those. I've kind of just mentioned to this a moment ago, actually, that you can have you can now push, if you're using big data and BigQuery rather, you can push stuff back out to Google Sheets for people to access that data, which is actually kind of quite handy. And we have a link with one of our companies we work with where we've got access to all the data that they store on BigQuery. Of course, we don't have access to the actual data set itself. They don't want us messing with that, but they've pushed it back out through a Google Sheet, so we can see the data that we need to see, and they filtered it, and we can analyze it, and we can filter and sort it. We do all the things that we need to do with it to get the information we need, but we can't access the source data, so it gives them a level of control over their data. And the same will be true of you. Again, if you're using that data up there in the cloud and you want to give people access to it, you can give it to them via a Google Sheet, because of course it's a familiar interface for them. They're used to that analysis, and it's an easier tool for them to use than using it in a different interface. So that's new, recently added in, so that's available for you. Okay, I'm going to need to call on you, Dave, or James, if James has joined us now, to go through this one. Send group membership information in outbound SAML responses. Put the pictures in to give you a sense of what it's about. I don't actually know what this actually means in real terms. And Dave, are you able to jump in and explain this one?
Yeah, so similar to what we were talking about with SSO, when you've got SAML connectivity, you can provide more information other than just the email address. So in this the example that you've got on screen, it's given the option to map a field for first name and last name, and I think there are other fields available as well. So it's sharing information across through other technologies that are linked into your Google accounts, so that you're not just necessarily sharing your username and authorization token. It's allowing you to pull through more information, which aligns technologies better.
So if in this example, the sales lead and the GCP pilot groups there, those will be the people with the subscription to Looker. So you share that information with them, and then they would then know they had valid accounts.
It's more that they are sharing the kind of the membership of those groups. So with Looker, they would then be able to create a group called sales leads, and they would have the first name, last name, and email address of the people to put into that group. So it saves you having to configure multiple platforms when you can pull all the information through from your Google admin panel.
All right, I see. Excellent, brilliant. Thanks for that, Dave. That's that one. Okay, this is I think it's a great one that has just come out this last month. The facility, because in the past all the shared drives sat at the root, so the permissions for everything, all of them were all the same. But you can now assign shared drives to organizational units. The advantage of that is if you've got, your HR department, they might well have a shared drive with all sorts of sensitive information about your employees in there. So clearly you need to restrict who does and doesn't have access to that. So you can actually do that by putting the shared drive into an organizational unit that gives that group access. But then you've still got the things like if the manager in there. So if you take the example of HR, your head probably isn't in the HR organizational unit. But if you allow the manager of that shared drive within HR to modify the drive settings and to add other people in who aren't in that OU, they can then add the head in if the head needs to be added in, and so on and so forth. So there's kind of much more granular control. Moving them into the right OU means that you've got much more control, and you can say who has and hasn't got access and things. So it seems a much more granular way to control shared drive settings, which wasn't there before. So that's a great new addition. Did you spot that one, Dave? Have you had a chance to play with that one yet?
I've not played with it, but it is something that I'm going to be looking into because it will be beneficial. The other benefit is that you can be a lot more, you can tidy up your shared drive structure, because we have a lot of people who, when they go into shared drives, have got dozens, if not hundreds, of shared drives shared with them because they happen to be shared to the whole organization rather than to individuals. So that will be another key benefit for us, to be able to reduce the number of shared drives that people see.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and other stuff is actually the option to add in people to specific files within a shared drive who aren't necessarily in the shared drive share list. Lots of shares in these sentences, which is also quite useful. So you can be, again, another level of granular control that says, yeah, generally everyone has this, but actually on this one occasion, this one document needs to be shared with this person who doesn't need the rest of the shared drive, but does need that particular file. So that seems to me it's a great step to give greater control, because I think shared drives can very easily get out of control in organizations. If you give everyone access to create them, which we know some schools have and some colleges have, it can create absolute chaos, because once documents are in the shared drive, if you don't get the access levels correct, then people can't do things that you would like them to be able to do with the documents that are in there. And don't forget that once they're in the shared drive, they're owned by the shared drive. So it can get quite complicated quite quickly. So it's definitely worth looking at that. And it's almost like a prompt to revisit and think about reorganizing and sorting out all those shared drives if you have got yourself into a pickle within your organization. So that seems to me a great, excuse me, a great additional step in the shared drives permissions, settings and things, and the way you organize them, which is fantastic. Okay, good. So one last little thing. Again, we mentioned this yesterday, and I was alerted to the fact they'd come out. I missed their notification on this. You know, it's why we do this, isn't it? It's too easy to miss things. Transformation reports window has just reopened. It gives you kind of it allows you to survey your organization about a whole series of different things. You can see the list on the screen there on the left about the things that it asks you questions about. You can send a survey out and you get responses from lots of different people, and then that will collate all that, and it actually gives you a biannual report telling you what kind of usage and what progress you've made towards certain things. It gives you an idea about certifications, and Dave, you quite rightly point out yesterday that they need not just to give you the total number, which is what it currently gives you, but actually to give you, you know, who have got those certifications, so you can double check against your own list and things. And it also makes some recommendations about what you should do and what you should think about, and then there are links to various places and that will help, all the usual Google Help pages that come with it. It seems to me a really useful tool. I mean, David did hint yesterday that it's about engagement, and schools will have themselves a development plan of some kind anyway. They might not necessarily have a kind of a strategic technology plan or a, you know, educational technology plan necessarily, but it might well be part of a larger plan. So you might already have a plan in place. You might think, well, then we don't need this, but it's just handy that it's a, you know, every 6 months just get a quick check of where are we at. If you are looking at, you know, acquiring as many Google certified educator certifications as you can as an indication of progress towards a particular goal, then it's handy just to be reminded what the numbers are and so on and so forth. It is worth saying that, of course, that if the person doing the certification chooses to use their personal Gmail, it won't appear in your list. It's only people that use their official domain accounts, of course. You can't guess that they're connected to you unless they use the right email and things, but it at least gives you a flavor and things. And it's a free tool, and I think it's just, you know, it's good to be prompted to think about things that will help you move towards the place you you are trying to get yourself to. So a great tool to use, and one that we would recommend. I'll put the link at the bottom. And if you have got a transformation report and you're looking at it now and you want, you know, a second voice to look at it with you to maybe make some suggestions, then by all means reach out to us, and we can have that conversation with you just to see where you want to go and what you want to do with that information if you are a user of that tool already. And those are the updates for the admin panel for May. The next update will be on July the 5th, which will be all the updates for June. And then we'll probably include some of the updates from this evening from the Anywhere School. Any more questions from anyone? Let me see where we're at. I'll just get rid of my notifications. No more questions. Any thoughts, any comments about any of the updates from there?
I think the chat spaces API link will be beneficial. I'd be interested to see if we can use Google Groups to populate chat spaces, because that is a way I can see of us really promoting the use of spaces across the organization, when we can put together all humanities teachers and all science teachers into space automatically, so that then they're not having to maintain it, because when there is turnover of staff, it becomes onerous to maintain lists of people who have access to spaces. So if we can link that to a Google group that we then drive through from our MIS using something like Salamander, it automates the process all the way through. So when you onboard a new member of staff, they're automatically put into a chat space. I can see that being really beneficial for us, but I need to have a play with that really and see what I can and can't do with it, what the limitations may be.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I think as we get closer and closer to the end of Currents, which is next summer, isn't it? A lot of the functionality that was in Currents, I think, will be moved into chat. So I think we'll see a lot of developments in chat over the next 12 months in preparation for the functionality to remain, but to be in a different app, basically. And yeah, I mean, I'm aware that I was talking with someone about using groups in Google Classroom. Of course, because it's a single call to the group from Google Classroom, it unpacks it into the individual emails, but then doesn't repeat the process anymore. And it might well be that that's the case in chat, that it's chat that makes the call for the group and just reads it as it stands at that moment in time. So you would need to think about updating it. I don't know how it will happen, but it seems to me that that's something that Google needs to deal with, doesn't it? Because groups are changing all the time, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
So a single, same for Google Classroom, a single call to it, and then you get 10 new kids arriving at half term, and they're in groups all over the place. You've got to manually add them all in. It's not a huge task, is it? But it'd be nice if the task wasn't there and it was automatically Google Classroom constantly checked any updates on those groups.
I think the fact that there's an API means that it won't be too long before organizations such as Salamander or Locker interface with those APIs and offer that service to us.
Yeah.
To populate those. So I'll be checking in with Salamander to see whether it's something that they've had a go with if I can't work it out myself.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Dave. That's really useful. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other comments? Excellent. So a very short one, this one. Very few updates this week. Only about 7 or 8 of them, I think, in total. I suspect that we're coming towards the season of lots of them. I think July and August are the kind of quiet months in schools in the US, aren't they? Most of the schools in the US have already broken up by sometime in June. So I think we ought to expect a big raft next month and the month after. I'll do the updates in August, in early September, I think. It's too uncertain about when people will be around in the UK in August, so I'll do it at a different time. But we'll do the one in July, of course, on the 5th, and then we'll take a break until September for the update.